there anything we'd do differently about our energy system? Are there things that are wrong with the way that we get energy today? What are the problems that we've got with energy? Well, I mean, it's not all bad. And energy has transformed people's lives. You can see from the graph here that the richer people get, regardless of whether they're from the US, from France, Japan or China, the more energy they want to use. And this energy is allowing people to have more comfortable lives and letting them be more productive. But there's an issue in that you see China and India down in the left-hand corner. The average income in these countries is set to double in just the next 10 years. So the amount of energy they're going to be using is also set to double. And this could be causing us a problem, because not only is energy changing the world, changing people's lives, it's changing the environment around us with machines like this, like a power station. Climate change isn't really a hot topic anymore, if you excuse the pun. The global financial crisis came along and made everybody sort of forget about the big issues with the environment. But there's still some people who are passionately writing about it. For example, the Daily Mail. They've tirelessly worked to campaign against climate change. So we've got a report here, one of their headlines from a couple of months back, saying that for some reason, climate change stopped around about the time that the Spice Girls first got to #1. I don't know if this is coincidence or if it's cause and effect. But I've got an issue with this. So the graph looks convincing. 1997, 2012, temperatures were the same. But I'm hoping there's a few people here who have done GCSE science. You only need to have done science at that level to know you perhaps shouldn't draw a trend from a very small portion of the data. So we've got the data from the Met Office as to what the temperature has been in the past. The pink line is what the Daily Mail say. But if we start plotting what temperatures have been further back into the past, we see perhaps there's been a slightly different trend, perhaps one that's going upwards. And this current period is just scattered within the trend. This is important because if we project these two lines forwards across your lifetimes, because medical science is pretty good nowadays, you should probably all be kicking around still in 2080, we're looking at the world being quite different to it is today. It could be 3 degrees warmer than we were during the 60s and the 80s. And any zone that's above, say, 2 degrees of warming, people tend to think of this as quite a dangerous place to be, because at no time since the invention of agriculture 10,000 years ago has the planet been this warm. I tend to think agriculture is quite an important thing. I depend quite heavily on my food every day, so I think it's perhaps something we don't want to be experimenting with and seeing if it works in a world that's this warm. So the problem we have is not perhaps thinking of it in terms of temperature, but thinking of this in terms of energy. Because if all the land masses and all of the oceans and the air is all a couple of degrees warmer, there's an awful lot more energy sloshing around in our weather systems. They tend not to dissipate this energy in a nice, calm, linear fashion. It comes out in short, sharp bursts. One I can think of was Hurricane Sandy recently, which tore apart parts of the Caribbean, parts of New York. Another one of these bursts of energy you can think of is heat waves that have gone on recently. One in Australia last summer, and this picture here is from Russia. You wouldn't think of Moscow as normally a warm place. They had a heat wave in 2010 that killed 56,000 people in the space of a week. It's basically taking most of the population of Bedford outside and shooting them. So we're not talking small things. But that's all a bit of doom and gloom, really. And this is probably not an event devoted to problems, it's devoted to solutions. So we need to think, is there something we can do different? Can we maybe solve this problem? But to solve a problem, you need to understand it. So first, let's think, how do we use energy in the UK? Each of these boxes is proportional to the amount of energy we use for these different means. So it's reasonably even split between burning fossil fuels to make electricity, burning them to make heat to keep our houses and our schools warm, and burning them to move stuff about, most of which in cars and trucks, so land transport. We spend a lot of our time a lot of energy in recent years investing in renewable power, putting up wind turbines, converting our coal-fired power stations to burn biomass. And you can see the effect that's had. There's been quite a penetration of renewable energy in the electricity sector, the dark bar on top, but we've only really begun to scratch the surface with heat and transport. It's because it's very hard to heat your house with a wind turbine. It's very hard to drive your car using wood pellets. So perhaps we need something a bit different in this area. One different thing we could try is hydrogen fuel cells. This is a picture of 3 different sizes of fuel cell. And I like to think of them as being a cross between an engine and a battery. An engine because it's something that converts fuel into power. It doesn't run out of energy very quickly like a battery does. But it's like a battery because you don't burn the fuel, there's no combustion. It's all done with electrochemical reactions, just like the chemical reactions you have in a battery. So if we were to explode one of these things on the left, one of these fuel cells, it would look a little bit like this. In the middle you can see one individual cell, and you put lots of them together to make the stack. And this cell is made up of an anode and a cathode, just as you have in a battery. And on one side you use a platinum catalyst that turns hydrogen into hydrogen ions and electrons. On the other side, you take those hydrogen ions in, combine them with oxygen from the air, and get water. So that's an interesting thing, because the only byproduct of this is H2O. That's seemingly quite clean. So they're clean, they're efficient, and, well, drinking water is your only output. You can use fuel cells to power your house. There's an example here of a system from Panasonic. It basically works like a gas boiler. You take in natural gas, convert that into hydrogen by stripping the hydrogen atoms off it. You then use that hydrogen to create heat, to heat your house, and electricity as a byproduct. So it has advantages over the renewable systems because it's very hard to heat your house in the depths of winter using solar thermal panels, for example. You want the heat when the sun isn't out. So this thing can heat your house all throughout the depths of winter. And similarly, you can use a fuel cell to power a car. You swap the engine for a fuel cell, the petrol tank for a hydrogen tank. Again, this is good because you've got a car where the only emissions are just water coming out of the exhaust pipe. Quite a bit cleaner than the things we're driving around today. And the other benefit this has over a renewable system is it behaves like a car. It feels like a car. One of these, this Honda here, it can drive 300-400 miles on a single tank. And then it only takes 3 minutes to refuel that tank. So that's the kind of performance that people expect. So that's the fuel cell covered. It's a pretty good system, but it's only a converter. We've got to think, where do we actually get this hydrogen from to power these things? It's not like you can just dig hydrogen up out of the ground. We actually have to manufacture it. And today, most of the world's hydrogen is produced in big refineries like this one. You take natural gas or oil, you take the hydrogen off it, and it gets used for things like making fertilizer or chemicals. And the basic reaction here is for natural gas. And natural gas is methane, which is CH4. So you react that with oxygen, strip off the hydrogens, and we did it. The byproduct we get is CO2, the exact thing we're trying to avoid. So perhaps this isn't the most sustainable option we can think of. It is at least a step in the right direction, because going via this route, we avoid combusting the fuel, it can be more efficient, so you get more energy out per unit of CO2. But CH4 isn't the only molecule I can think of that has lots of hydrogen in it and is abundant. There's another one, H2O. You can produce hydrogen directly from water with a very simple piece of kit like this, which is an electrolyzer. It's basically a fuel cell just run backwards. You've got lots of individual plates that you submerge in water. You pass an electric current through them. You can see there on the left. Individual bubbles of gas form, and then you can collect them out of the pipes, and then you've got a fuel source of hydrogen. All you need is electricity, and that could be clean electricity. Say sometime in the future when we've plastered so much of Scotland with wind turbines that we have excess energy when the wind's blowing, we could use that to create hydrogen to power our cars or power our houses. We could also potentially use a new generation of nuclear reactor that is optimized to produce both hydrogen and electricity simultaneously. So, hydrogen is fantastic. It can solve all of the world's energy problems. Don't know, is there anything left to say? Perhaps there are actually some problems with this solution. Problems with the solution to the problem. Let's think about it. The most common one that people think about is cost. If you ask a manufacturer, cost, cost, and cost are their three main priorities. And it's not without good reason. So one thing I've done is I've tracked the price of the domestic fuel cell systems over maybe the last 10 years since they were first introduced in Japan. And you can see that every time you go from 1 to 10 to 100, every time you increase the number that have been produced by a factor of 10, the cost comes down by about a third. So if you plot number built and price on logarithmic axes like these, you end up with straight lines. Every time you double, you reduce by a fixed percentage. And this is exactly the process that's happened with solar panels that's made them become quite a mainstream technology in recent years. But the problem we've got with the fuel cells is they're starting from such a high up level. If you want to buy one of these Panasonic systems nowadays, it will set you back £15,000. So hands up, anyone who wants to spend 15 grand to heat your house. Not seeing too many takers. Shame. But we need to get down to the kind of price of a regular gas boiler, because that's the competition. So we're looking at £2,000–3,000. But the problem is, we're going to need to build maybe 1 million, maybe 10, maybe 100 million of these systems before they get down to that price. So we're either going to have to find an awful lot of rich people, or we're going to have to get governments to help out by providing subsidies or incentives to install these things. It's a very similar situation for the vehicles. This is a set of government, manufacturer estimates for what the price of fuel cells is going to be in the future for cars such as the Honda Clarity. When that Honda was released in 2008, it cost $1 million. The only other car I can think of with a price tag like that is the McLaren F1, which Mr. Bean famously crashed a couple of months back. Nowadays, Honda claim they can make their Clarity for $100,000, which puts it in the price bracket of a Porsche. So it's getting a bit more reasonable. And I think in 5 years' time, it might only be $50,000, so about the price of a Mercedes. I think that's a reasonable comparison. A nice saloon, another nice saloon. It's certainly a better comparison than between these two cars, although I think that particular McLaren's got a few too many air vents on the front, so it might not be worth $1 million. So if cost is the only issue, we've got ways around it. We can scale up production, we can optimize the systems. There's sort of tried and tested ways of getting the cost of products down. But that might not be the only issue. That's just the one that people tend to focus on. Another thing I'm interested in is how much energy does it actually take to move these cars around? These hydrogen vehicles, how fuel efficient are they? Again, going back to GCSE level science, you can think there's a few equations that relate energy and forces to motion and to mass. So we've got force is mass times acceleration. So the heavier your car, the more energy, the more force you need to accelerate it. Momentum is mass times velocity. So a heavy car is going to take a lot more energy to get it moving. So we can expect, if we were to plot the mass of fuel cell vehicles against the amount of fuel they need to run a kilometre, we get this, a reasonable trend between the two. And this is one data point for every different fuel cell vehicle that's been manufactured to date. So I'd like to focus on a couple of these. On the right, we've got the Honda Clarity that I've been going on about, using the latest state-of-the-art Japanese technology. The one we've got on the left, you can see it's slightly lower down on the graph. It actually uses a little bit less fuel to go around, so it's a bit more efficient. So I wonder, what car could that be? It's actually an Austin A40, built in the 1970s and converted to run on hydrogen by a professor. It's using pretty archaic fuel cell technology, but still, it actually does better than the state-of-the-art nowadays. 40 years separates these cars, but I don't see an awful lot of technical improvement that's gone on in that time. And that worries me. We should be able to do better than this, so that's why aren't we? And it really hits home if you compare this to some kind of reference. I mean, I don't expect any of you to know what 1.5 megajoules per kilometre means. So let's have a bit of context. The average car driving around on the UK roads today sits up there. So at least we can say all the fuel cell vehicles are better than this. The Toyota Prius, the hybrid car that's become quite popular, that's sitting around about in the middle. But actually the most efficient car on our roads today is a Renault Clio, a diesel-engined Clio. And that is actually more efficient than the majority of the fuel cell cars that have been built to date. So I would argue perhaps we're going along the wrong lines when we're designing our fuel cell cars. We're thinking big luxury sedans. Perhaps we should be thinking, how can we build slightly smaller, more economical, more environmentally friendly vehicles? So, I hope I've not disappointed you by saying that hydrogen perhaps isn't the silver bullet, the magical saviour of our world. But to be fair, if that's what I discovered, I probably wouldn't be talking to you today. I'd be retired on my nice private Caribbean island, because I'd be a very, very rich man. Perhaps the idea I wanted to spread today is that life is perhaps a bit more complicated than you want it to be. It's not always as simple as just, here's an invention, it solves the problem. You have to look at it at different angles. And sometimes what you find is basically another problem that needs to be solved. And this is good news for you, bad news for me, because you're about to come to the stage in your careers where you're the ones tackling these problems. So I hope some of you enjoy getting stuck into them. And thank you very much.